Okay, welcome back for part two of our Origins of World War One. While the assassination of Franz Ferdinand by Gavrilo Princip is the spark that lights World War One, like we said, there's a lot of long-term and also short-term reasons for the outbreak of war. So we know our reasons for World War One by our acronym of MAIN. Each letter, of course, is going to stand for a different reason. So let's get right into that. Our M stands for militarism. Militarism we define as the glorification of military power and values throughout a society. At this time, the belief is that what makes a nation great, what makes a nation powerful, is by having a big army and navy, by being able to wage war at a moment's will, and to be able to overwhelm the enemy.
Go!
So as a result of this ideology, we end up having an arms race in Europe between the major Western European nations. They are competing to create larger and stronger navies, to have a larger standing army, and to integrate new technology into their armies. So, for example, a huge naval competition breaks out between Britain and Germany as each is trying to build more battleships out of fear that if the other gets too powerful, that they may cut off shipping in the Atlantic Ocean or in the Mediterranean, and that would be very detrimental for either one of those countries. So, in addition, each nation, feeling that war is almost inevitable in Europe, is going to come up with a plan. This is the very famous Schlieffen Plan that comes from Germany, written by an officer. And this was basically Germany's plan for what they will do should they go to war with France. And as you can see by the border, the plan is to go, conduct a front in France, but also go through, invade Belgium in order to circle around and eventually encircle Paris, the capital, and win against France in that way. And this is actually the plan that Germany is going to try to follow in World War One. Also, nations at this time have conscription, mandatory military service for young men, which results in a huge army buildup as well. Our A stands for alliances. In the years leading up to World War I, this complex and evolving series of alliances is going to form in Europe that's basically going to create these two sides that are going to be the rivals in World War I. It starts with Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy forming the Triple Alliance, and in response to that threat, the nations on either side of Germany, Austria-Hungary, France, and Russia are going to form an alliance. Later, Britain is going to come in as well, that we know as the Triple Entente. My French is really good. So this is what the alliance system is going to look like. So these are, basically expanded over time. Initially, we have Germany, Austria-Hungary making that alliance in 1879. Later, Italy is going to come in. As World War II breaks out, the Ottoman Empire in 1914 is going to ally with Italy, Austria-Hungary, Germany. They're going to back Bulgaria. And on the other side, we have first Russia and France make an alliance in response to the threat of Germany, Austria-Hungary. Later, Britain is going to come in the early 1900s, and they're going to ally with Serbia. Now, Bulgaria and Serbia are consequential here because these are the two sides that are going to come at odds after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. So our cartoon kind of illustrates, the domino effect, if you will, of the event of the assassination, leading to all of these different nations getting involved here. So let's go over, how did this alliance system, how did it, eventually lead to war? So let's look at our map here. So our first event, we have Serbian nationalists assassinating the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. Now, in response to that, Austria-Hungary is going to declare war on Serbia. Now, Serbia is allied with Russia because they have some ethnic similarities there. And Russia is going to come to Austria-Hungary's aid. Now, Germany has a treaty, a mutual defense pact with Austria-Hungary. So since Russia is threatening Austria-Hungary, Germany is going to declare war on Russia. And wait a minute, France is in an alliance with Russia, so now they're going to declare war on Germany. So Germany is threatened on two fronts now. And wait a minute, Germany, remember that Schlieffen Plan, they're going to come in through Belgium in order to have easy access to France, try to encircle Paris. And Britain, being allied with both France and Russia, and also having an alliance with Belgium, is going to come to their aid by declaring war on Germany. Now, Japan, don't forget about them. They've become an industrial nation by now. They have a treaty actually with Britain at this time, and they're going to declare war on Germany. Austria-Hungary, of course, has to declare war on Japan because they declared war on Germany, and then the other nations are going to fill in while some remaining neutral. Ottoman Empire, Bulgaria, they're going to come in on the side of Germany and Austria-Hungary. Italy's actually going to flip-flop. They're going to abandon their alliance, and they're going to come to the side of what will be the Allied powers. Serbia, Romania, Greece are in there as well. And some like Spain and Nordic countries are going to remain neutral in this conflict. Of course, Switzerland's going to be neutral because, well, it's Switzerland. Our I in Maine stands for imperialism. You remember this was the topic of our last unit here. Throughout the first global age, reaching all the way into the beginning of the 20th century, the major European nations have been competing for colonies overseas. And by the time we get to 1900, we have what we'd call a Western-dominated world. The whole of Africa has been colonized by the European powers: France, Britain, Spain, Portugal, Germany. The East Indies, India, China, of course, has been subjugated by Britain by this time. So we have a world that is essentially controlled by Europe, and each of these countries, feels that the bigger their empire is, the greater that their nation looks. Now, Germany was actually late to the game. They didn't unify until the 1870s. So after they industrialized and started to take over colonies, they found that, hey, there's not really much left. France and Great Britain, they've had a big head start, and they've swallowed up a lot of the most desirable colonies. And so they don't feel like their colonial empire is really reflective of the true greatness of their nation. And so they're jealous of Britain and France. Our last one, our N, stands for nationalism. This is more than just being patriotic, just being proud of your country. With nationalism, you celebrate your nation's identity. You feel like your nation is the greatest on earth and superior to all other nations. All the nations are inferior. So it goes beyond just having pride in your country. You have this sort of diluted view that you are the best, everybody else is inferior. And, because of this, because of nationalism, every nation is going to come in thinking that their army is the greatest, that their navy is the greatest. And the propaganda, what's taught to kids in school, what's reflected in the media, is going to feed into this. And so this overconfidence caused by nationalism is going to be really significant, because all these nations are going to come into this war believing the same myth. The myth that this war will be over with quickly, that their nation is going to win. World War I starts in August, and Kaiser Wilhelm of Germany, the leader of Germany, says to the troops as they're marching off that you'll be home before the leaves fall from the trees. Like, this belief that this war is going to take, a couple months. It's going to be a big, decisive battle. Of course, Germany is going to win, and it'll all be over. And every single nation goes into this conflict believing the same thing. And we know that isn't going to be true. So let's talk about, why is World War I different from previous wars? So World War I, let's first of all talk about the sides here. We have on the one side the Allied powers: Britain, France, Russia, Japan will be in there, Belgium, Serbia. Eventually the United States, after remaining neutral for much of the war, will come in 1917. On the other side, we have the Central Powers. This is Germany, Austria-Hungary, uh, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire. So we call World War I the first modern industrial war. This is the first war that's really fought with the full force of the advancements of the Industrial Revolution, and it's going to have some big consequences. So we're going to see tanks, planes being used on the battlefield for the first time. We'll have massive, massive artillery created by each army. Artillery like Big Bertha the Germans had. That it has to be moved on train tracks because it's so large. And we have, of course, the machine gun, the Maxim gun, being introduced into warfare. Also, we have flamethrowers being used on the battlefield, and then that very devastating new weapon, poison gas. So this is going to be the first war in modern times. It's going to be fought using chemical weapons. The effect of all these new technologies combined is going to lead to astounding numbers of casualties. At least 10 million are going to die in combat. Many more are going to be wounded. And a lot of it has to do with these new technologies and the devastating consequences that they have for war. World War I is divided into two major fronts. There's the Eastern Front, which is between Russia and Germany, and then there's the Western Front between Germany and France. Now, especially on the Western Front, this new type of warfare is going to result that we know as trench warfare. So the new technology is really going to make it difficult for armies to fight in the traditional way. I mean, these armies are going in, they still have cavalry units, so they still have horses, and they're still using these outdated tactics, using these big, army advancements, trying to make charges at the enemy line to break the center of it so you can overwhelm them. And, the result is going to be that the technology, the machine guns, the artillery are just really going to make that a fool's errand. And so what we're going to see instead is the armies are going to dig in. And so these extensive networks of trenches are going to be created on the Western Front. And the war is going to be fought really over inches, with neither line actually moving very far. Really, it's fought for the most part to a stalemate, at least on the Western Front. So World War I, we call it a world war because truly it was global. We got to remember that the powers here, have these colonial empires. And so we see the black here is the extent of all the Triple Entente allies, so the allied powers here, and the territory they control. And then the red would be the territory controlled by the Central Powers. And so we see much of the world, with the exception of South America, is somehow involved in this war. And it wasn't just the soldiers from the respective nations that were fighting, also colonial troops from their colonies in Africa and Australia, etc. They're also going to take part in this conflict. And not only did the fighting take place in Europe, there's actually fighting between different colonies allied with the Central and Allied powers that happened in Africa and the South Pacific as well. So it truly was a global war. World War I also introduces this idea of total warfare. The idea that, this war can't just be fought with the soldiers on the battlefield, that it takes the effort, the combined effort of everyone in the nation to do their part. Here we see some propaganda posters from the United States. And these are, encouraging citizens to do their part at home to help with the war effort. Can and preserve your own food, eat more cottage cheese so the meat can go to the soldiers, volunteer for the Red Cross to help in the war effort. Do